Human society is now enjoying a state of prosperity where survival is no longer a constant threat. Having largely freed itself from the risk of wild beasts and the hardship of subsistence, modern society emphasizes the pursuit of inner desires, listening to one's inner voice, and finding joy in life as the path to happiness. However, despite this effort, many people appear unable to achieve true happiness. This is due to the emergence of new challenges in modern life, boredom, and a sense of emptiness. In the past, people seek happiness through the help of God and religion, but with the rise of human reason, happiness began to be seen not as divine grace but as a personal and human pleasure. At the same time, suffering came to be regarded as a negative aspect to be avoided by any rational being. Yet, if we ask whether modern individuals with their free spirits are genuinely happier, the answers seem far from positive. People appear to suffer even more, consumed by endless boredom and emptiness.
According to psychologist Jonathan Haidt, the power of human reason is little more than an illusion. Human reason is akin to a small rider sitting atop a large elephant of instinct. While the elephant may cooperate with the rider to some extent, if it decides to go in a different direction, the rider cannot stop it. Instead of admitting defeat, the rider busies itself, justifying the elephant's actions. Emotions and instincts are the true masters of humanity. The advice to follow your inner voice and seek happiness is effectively saying to listen to the elephant's desires. But would doing so truly lead to happiness? When we pursue pleasure, the most prominent player in our brains is undoubtedly dopamine. However, contrary to common belief that dopamine is associated merely with pleasure and happiness, it plays a much broader role. In laboratory experiments, mice can be trained to press a button to receive food. When they do so, dopamine is released in their brain, motivating them to press the button again. If a device is attached to their brain to directly stimulate dopamine release, the mice will continue pressing the button endlessly, even without food being dispensed. Interestingly, dopamine is released more strongly before the mice press the button, while their levels return to normal once the predicted reward is received. Dopamine responds more intensely to unexpected rewards. For example, if pressing the button resulted in a much tastier food than expected or no reward at all, dopamine level will spike or plummet accordingly.
One of the easiest way people access dopamine today is through short-form content like YouTube Shorts. These types of content are very stimulating and provide unpredictable rewards, continuously triggering dopamine release in the brain. Not only are the rewards immediate, but the unpredictability of the content reinforces the illusion of constantly discovering something amazing, keeping dopamine levels high. Frequent exposure to such stimuli conditions the brain to require ever greater level of stimulation, making it increasingly difficult to find satisfaction in everyday activities. This can lead to more severe issues like lethargy and lack of motivation, far beyond simple boredom. Stanford University professor Robert Sapolsky was warned of the danger of dopamine addiction, explaining how continuous stimulation dulls the brain's dopamine response. In experiments, mice with depleted dopamine levels stop seeking and consuming food even when it is placed in front of them unless it is physically fed to them. This demonstrates that desire and enjoyment are different. Dopamine is more related to anticipation than to simple pleasure or happiness. The joy from dopamine comes not from the fullness after eating, but from the appetite before the meal. Moreover, when neurons in the brain becomes fatigued from frequent dopamine release, they begin to release dopamine less frequently in response to the same stimuli. When the stimulation ends, dopamine levels may not merely return to the baseline, but drop even lower. This leads the brain to crave dopamine even more, creating a vicious cycle. It is akin to quenching thirst with seawater, where the more you consume, the thirstier you become. The danger of addiction lies not in the peak of intense pleasure, but in the increasing hunger and dissatisfaction it fosters. Consequently, people often find themselves feeling worse after indulging in binge watching YouTube shorts or consuming sugar laden food all day. This cycle is perpetuated by release of cortisol, the stress hormone, which can trigger further dopamine release, completing the feedback loop.
Perfect eternal happiness is unattainable. The closer we try to approach it, the more elusive it becomes. In this context, dopamine detox, a practice aimed at reducing dopamine triggering activities, has been suggested as one way to pursue happiness. However, dopamine is not just essential for motivation, but also for normal life functions like movement and emotional regulation. Artificially suppressing dopamine levels would lead to severe consequences, reducing functionality rather than fostering happiness. Rather than adopting an extreme excited mode by cutting off all dopamine inducing activities, the bigger issue lies in how moderate habits of quickly filling moments of boredom with instant dopamine have undermined our motivation for more meaningful pursuits. What can be done then? Addiction is notoriously hard to break, even after long periods. Studies show that the brain can adapt to its surroundings and react differently depending on the environment. Even if a person suffered greatly during their addiction, being exposed to the same circumstances can reignite the brain's expectation of past rewards and trigger dopamine release. Conversely, unfamiliar environments can produce drastically different responses, even making lower than lethal doses of drugs deadly. Thus, physically separating oneself from cheap temptations can be an effective strategy. Living organisms strive to maintain balance in all aspects of their being, physical, emotional, and more. This includes pleasure and pain. While it seems rational to avoid pain and seek pleasure, studies reveal that humans dislike extremely monotonous and happy worlds as much as uncertain and painful ones. Instead, they prefer something in between. Contrary to economists' prediction that people would always value today's $10 over $10 in the future, experiments show that humans often delay gratification to savor it and even find pleasure in pain. Horror movies and thrill rides, for example, are akin to torture when taken at face value, yet they are consumed as entertainment. Pain can provide its own form of pleasure and help recalibrate our sensitivities to joy.
In summary, stepping out of a greenhouse and embracing some hardship is necessary. Achieving sustainable and healthy happiness requires effort. True self-care is not about endless pleasure, but about moderation and self-control. When approached this way, dopamine becomes a reliable ally rather than an adversary.